In this tutorial, I will explain how to work with auto-incremented attributes in a VM. Auto-incremented attributes are attributes whose values are calculated automatically by the system by incrementing a counter that starts with a particular value, usually 1. First of all, why do we need auto-incremented attributes? Why cannot we calculate values of such attributes using business rules? The reason is that the values of such attributes usually need to be unique. You do not want two instances of the same object to have the same value. So you need to quickly reserve the value for your new instance before some other user reserves the value. Rules cannot guarantee that, but modifications performed by rules are only committed to the database when the entire request is complete. So there is a chance that someone else will use the same value while your request is executing. Or look at this scenario. Let's say that the user needs to see the auto-incremented value before the record is created. For example, the user is submitting a form and he wants to see the auto-incremented value before the form is submitted. If you use rules to calculate the initial value of the attribute displayed on the form, nothing stops other users from using the same value while the first user is filling out the form. So to quickly auto-increment and reserve the value, we need to use auto-incremented attributes. Let's see how this works using a simple example. Let's create an object for testing. We will call it test. And we'll create one text attribute. And one number attribute. And we'll make this number attribute auto-incremented. For now, we will just use the default values here. Let's see how this works. Let's run our application in the browser and create a few instances of the object. Let's now see the results. We can see that the values are automatically incremented by the system. In this example, any new instance of the object will cause the value to be incremented. What if the user wants to see the value that the new object will have before the form is submitted? To implement this, we need to use a rule that uses the next sequence number function. This function returns the next value of the specified auto-incremented attribute so that we can set it into the attribute ourselves in our rules. All we have to do is write a rule that looks like this. The important thing here is to make sure that the rule is used in form initialization. A rule using isUndefined is automatically used during form initialization, but if you are not sure, set the value explicitly here. What happens is that the rule will be executed before the form is displayed. The value will be incremented and shown on the form. When the form is submitted, the value will not be auto-incremented again, because if the attribute already has a value, it is not auto-incremented. Let's see how this works. So now, when the form is displayed, we can see the auto-incremented value straight away. And this value is not changed when the form is submitted. Sometimes it is necessary to increment the value not for every instance of the object, but only for instances that share the same value of some other attribute. Let's say, for example, that our application manages orders, and each order has a reference number. This number includes the year when the order was created, followed by a sequential number within this year. So we want this sequential number to be incremented not for all orders, but for orders that belong to the same year. Let's see how we can do this. Let's create the product order object. With the year created attribute. That will store the year that when the order has been created, and the sequence number attribute. And this attribute will be auto-incremented, and when defining the auto-incremented properties of the attribute, we will select the auto-increment within a group of instances radio button, and then select the year created attribute as the attribute that determines the value of the group. Let's see what happens now. We will go to the browser and create a few instances of the product order object. So we will create a few instances for 2019 and a couple for 2018. And when we display the results, we can see that the numbers are incremented for each year independently. Can we display the auto-incremented value on a form? Not if the year created attribute is entered by the user, because auto-incremented value is dependent on the year. However, we can calculate created year by rules and not allow the user to enter it. Then we can display the auto-incremented value. To do this, let's make year created attribute calculated. And add a rule that calculates it. And we will also add a rule to initialize sequence number. Note that here we're specifying year created as a group value for calculation. An important thing here is to make sure that the rule is only executed once, and that the value of the year created attribute is already defined when the rule is executed. By default, a where_am does not guarantee that. So to enforce this, we will use rule priorities and make sure that the priority of the rule that calculates the auto-incremented number is lower than the priority of the rule that calculates year created. Default priorities for rules that modify attribute values is 50. So let's make priority of our rule 49. Let's see how this works. When we go to the browser now and create the product order object, we can see that the form displays now a correct auto-incremented number. Let's now put it all together and define a reference number of the order as some prefix, the number of the year, and the sequential number within that year. So we will create the reference number attribute. And modify our rule as follows. So if the ref number is undefined, then we'll set the sequential number properly using the next sequence number function, and then calculate reference number as a concatenation of some prefix, a year created, and the correct sequential number. Let's add reference number to the form and see how it works. We'll remove the calculated attributes from here and only leave reference number. Let's now go to the browser. So now if we create a new product order, we can see the system automatically calculates correct reference number of the order. Let's look at our rule again. Could we write it a little differently and without initializing the sequence number attribute, like so? So just use the next sequence number function without setting the auto-incremented attribute. The answer is no. If you write the rule without setting the value of the auto-incremented attribute, then the value will be auto-incremented twice, once by a rule and once automatically by the system. One other thing I forgot to mention is this. Like I said before, a variable will automatically calculate an auto-incremented value of the attribute if the value has not already been set by rules. For auto-incremented attributes that do not involve group values, this happens before rules are executed. However, auto-incremented attributes that do involve groups are incremented after rules have been executed. This is because the system needs to know the value of the group attribute before it auto-increments the value. This is why we sometimes need to set the value manually using the next sequence number function.